again. Just give me a hands in the face, man. I don't think it's one of those.
So, Jets, game 2 at Jerry World this year. Man, he was a terror. He was all over poor Zach Wilson. He sacked him twice. He hurried him 5 more times. Okay, that's the guy. You know, that's who I want to see. Even at Philadelphia, he had a sack and a half, and he went up with 9 total tackles.
Yeah.
Okay, I can live with that because, you took it up a notch, okay? Giants, I want to see you eat. I want to see you terrorize that poor young quarterback who probably doesn't have much of a future in this league, because that's who you are and that's what you do, and you weren't into it. So we've talked about Micah podcasting on, I think he does it on, is it Monday or Tuesday? I don't know. But the point is, I'm fine if you podcast, if you can back it up and dominate. You can podcast all you want if you live up to it on Sunday.
Because it's mindset, and he has all the talent in the world, so that's not up for debate. His talent is generational. His talent is otherworldly. I mean, his quickness, his twitch, his when he's involved and he's engaged, his motor is unbelievable. He's chasing quarterbacks down.
Yeah.
But in order to put him in the conversation with the greats, even today's greats, so you don't mention Lawrence, but today's greats, the Myles Garrett, the T.J. Watts, the Max Crosby, the Nicholas John Bosa, even the Joey Bosa's, the Khalil Macks of the world. You have to be consistent. You have to do it week in and week out. And when it's bad teams, there's an expectation. There should be a dependability.
And see, the biggest problem with this whole thing is they're not talking about the game. This is where we get into murky territory, where you start to label players as their character. When you start to try to point out what players are as a person, their motivation, their character traits. And see, this is where sports debate gets very, very sketchy. There's no way that anybody should be trying to question whether or not Micah Parsons has a motor or whether or not he has drive. Because honestly, when you have these type of discussions, and I know how Undisputed and Skip Bayless gets down, they're going to come back to this. When you have these type of discussions and you have a national platform, you have influence in making people believe the narratives that you put out about these players. Not even just their play on the field, but now you're putting out narratives about their mentality. You labeled Dak Prescott as weak and not a leader because he's been dealing with losses that had one that hit extremely close to home during COVID time. And you want to question his mentality and his ability to be a leader. And now we've seen that same type of question be perpetuated all throughout the media. Now we're going to try to put the lazy tag on Micah Parsons. Let's be real. That's where we're going with this. We're putting the lazy tag on Micah Parsons.
You can't have it both ways. Either the New York Giants are a terrible football team, and us as fans and analysts shouldn't look at that game and shouldn't take that anything the Cowboys did in that game and look at it as anything positive or anything to be praised, or the New York Giants are a professional football team, and regardless of who you're playing, you need to go out there and perform. And the players should get their praises one way or the other. See, Undisputed is talking out of both sides of their mouth right now. Because in the very same breath in which they tried to completely dismiss the Cowboys dismantling the Giants, which is kind of understandable given the situation, they're also trying to overly critique Micah Parsons for the one game, the first game in his career, where he did not record an actual counting number statistic. Not only this, but the most egregious part of this is the fact that they're actually trying to question Micah Parsons' mentality. They're questioning his drive and whether or not he actually wants it. They're talking about the dude who doesn't like coming out of preseason games. They're talking about the dude in which the Cowboys can be up 30 points and he still wants to be out there ripping the quarterback apart. They're talking about the guy that's been in the NFL for 2 full seasons, has made 2 All-Pro teams, won a Rookie of the Year defensively, and is on pace this year to actually outpace his previous 2 seasons as it pertains to the most relevant counting numbers with sacks. You're also talking about a guy who has been double teamed and won against those double teams pretty much more than anybody in the NFL not named Myles Garrett. Yet we're trying to call into question whether or not Micah Parsons is consistent enough to be considered the elite defensive player that he actually is, and that the numbers 100% back up since he's been in the NFL. Richard Sherman, you want to talk about consistency? Let's take a look at some consistency real quick. How's this for consistent? In 2021, he played 16 games, recorded 64 tackles, 20 assisted tackles, 84 combined tackles total, and 13 sacks, racking up 119.5 sack yardage with 3 forced fumbles. That sounds pretty damn good. Sounds like a dude that played every single down and was trying to get every piece of meat off the bone that he could to me. Okay, let's look at 2022. 17 games played, 42 tackles, 23 assisted tackles, 65 combined, 13.5 sacks, even though the rest of his tackle numbers went down because he was playing more defensive end in his second year than he was in his first year. He had a higher amount of sacks, just barely, but he had a higher amount of sacks, albeit for less yardage. Oh, also accounting for 3 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, and a fumble return touchdown just last year. Move to 2023, 9 games played, 18 tackles, 13 assisted, 31 combined so far, right on track with his pace from last year as far as his tackles go. And then his sack numbers are actually a little bit higher, and he's on pace. Even if he was to get 1 sack every game for the rest of the year, he would have 15.5 sacks if he was to accomplish that. Okay, let's say he gets a sack or 2 in one game and then skips another game or 2 and then get another sack or 2 in that game. Guess what? He would still be on pace to have the same amount of sacks as he had last year. Oh, and this year, his sacks have actually been a lot more impactful. As you can see, his sack yardage, on average, per sack, quarterbacks are losing roughly about 9 yards of field position with his sacks. That is extremely impressive. And he does have a forced fumble and a fumble recovery so far this year. So what prompted this criticism from Micah Parsons? Well, what prompted it was the fact that he didn't have an actual recorded statistic in the game against the New York Giants. Although I'm pretty sure when we see the QB pressure numbers come out, he will at least have a couple of those. Because I know for a fact I've seen a couple of times where DeVito had to throw the ball away because Micah Parsons was chasing him, okay? But they're trying to take this one singular game out of Micah Parsons' career, a game in which he was doubled and triple teamed, a game in which the Cowboys won 49-10 or whatever the ending score ended up being, 17, whatever it was. A game in which the Cowboys as a team recorded 5 sacks. A game in which Neville Gallimore, someone who we have not heard much of at all this season, was able to record a sack. A game in which Sam Williams was able to record a sack. A game in which Dorrance Armstrong was able to record a sack. Why is that important? The number one responsibility of players who are quote-unquote great is making those around them better. The attention given to Micah Parsons, though it didn't show up in his box score, I'm willing to bet. You go back and look at the film, you look at those plays, you look at those impact plays. I'm willing to bet Micah Parsons' presence on the field and the attention that he gets allowed his teammates, or at least made it easier for his teammates to be able to go and get those sacks. And to be quite frank, this is an absolutely ridiculous conversation. Richard Sherman said that Micah Parsons needs to be more consistent before he can be considered among the likes of the Joey Bosa's, the Nick Bosa's, the Khalil Macks, the Max Crosby's, and all these other guys in the league. Well, I wanted to actually see if there was any credence to that. If you take a look here, this is a player comparison. You can actually see that Micah Parsons is literally right on track with all the rest of these guys. The only dudes on this list with more sacks than Micah is Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, and Khalil Mack. And Khalil Mack's stats are being heavily buoyed by that 6-sack game he had for the Chargers earlier this year. You take those 6 sacks out, he has 3 sacks on the rest of the year, which means there's a lot of games in which you're not hearing Khalil Mack's name. Oh, you want me to prove it? There's been at least 3 games this year where Khalil Mack only accounted for a singular tackle in the entire game. A singular tackle, no sacks, just 1 tackle is what he recorded combined. There's been 3 games like that this season in which he accomplished this. There's been 6 games this season out of the 9 that he's played in which he hasn't recorded any sacks for a guy that's an all-time great pass rusher, which he is. Khalil Mack is an amazing defensive end. So we're not saying that any of these guys that we're looking at are quote-unquote bad. What we're doing is we're putting the argument posed against Micah Parsons into context. Khalil Mack doesn't show up every game and is a game breaker. Look at these stats. There's 1, 2, 3 games. One singular combined stat. And he might have a QB hit in those games as well, which I don't know how much weight you want to put into that. But going back and looking at all these statistics, bro, Micah Parsons is 100% holding his own with the elite of the league. And I don't even know why you brought up Joey and Nick Bosa, Richard Sherman, because Joey and Nick Bosa both have less sacks than Micah Parsons. They have either the same amount or less tackles than Micah Parsons. They have the same amount of forced fumbles as Micah Parsons. And they have the same amount of fumble recoveries as Micah Parsons. And mind you, this is even after Micah Parsons recorded a game in which he didn't record a single statistic. Now, we can look at the stats all day long and prove you guys wrong, but to sit here and question his mentality, to question his drive, to question whether or not he wants it is asinine and is honestly extremely disrespectful. Micah Parsons himself clearly wants it. He made statements after the game. He made a couple of cryptic tweets that alluded to the fact that he clearly wants it, to the point to where his defensive coordinator had to address this. Even in the 49-17 blowout, his defensive coordinator had to address this. And he said, that's any competitor, right? You always want to make an impact, and sometimes his impact is other people's chances to get things because of the attention that goes his way. Any competitor can get frustrated by that. There have been games like that, and there will be more like that. So I'm sorry, Richard Sherman, that you were largely a zone scheme concept cornerback, so you didn't have to really worry about getting that much attention on defense because you always had help over the top. I'm sorry, Keyshawn Johnson, that you don't know what it's like to be doubled and triple teamed on every single play in and out. I'm sorry you guys don't understand the concept of being such great players and such team players that your impact on the field can make your teammates better. I'm sorry that you guys can't understand that. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to question the drive or the motivation or the greatness of Micah Parsons, aka the Young Lion. We're not going to do that because Micah Parsons has done every single thing that he's been tasked to do since coming into this league. He's had to work through overcoming different challenges as far as getting the type of attention that he got after his first season. He's had to get bigger. He's had to put some weight on. He's done everything that you would want a player that is on track to become one of the all-time greats. He's done everything that you would want them to do, and he stayed hungry in the process. So to sit here and bring up, oh, if he's not going to record a stat, he shouldn't be on the podcast. To start attacking that platform, Skip Bayless, honestly, I think that you have some other agendas here. I know there's plenty of Cowboys fans out there that remember not too long ago, Micah Parsons was supposed to be a weekly guest on Undisputed every Monday when Shannon Sharp was still there, but then he bowed out from doing that gig. Probably because he figured out that Skip Bayless is one of the most fraudulent Cowboy fans in the entire country.
And you see, I smell something fishy right here. Skip, this is coming off more so as you feel threatened by yet another media platform popping up that's more than likely going to take some of your targeted audience or show some of your targeted audience just how phony your entire program is. Skip seems threatened here. He seems like a scorned girlfriend that was mad about Micah not coming on his show and was just waiting for the opportunity to try to say anything negative about Micah Parsons. This is what Skip Bayless does. Skip was one of the first people bringing up the Lawrence Taylor comparisons for Micah Parsons. Micah has always fought back against that comparison. He's made it very, very clear. Skip sets this unrealistic bar for players. He's done it for Dak. He's done it for Micah Parsons. He's done it for many other Cowboys that have come before these guys. He sets this unrealistic bar, and when the player inevitably doesn't live up to that, he uses all the praise and all the glory that he's given players in the past. He uses all of that as a free pass to completely attack and trash these players.
And even still, Who cares? We blew the doors off of them. We've seen Micah Parsons show up week after week after week when we needed him. We've seen him show up and help seal the game against the Chargers. We've seen him make a couple splash plays against the Philadelphia Eagles. We have seen Micah Parsons show up and be exactly who we have wanted him to be. We've seen him make impact plays against the Los Angeles Rams. I think it's completely unreasonable, unfair, and honestly ridiculous to expect players to play at this astronomical level week in and week out. And it's even more ridiculous to criticize players that have now established a history of high performance. I think it's even more ridiculous to try to over-critique and over-criticize players just because they didn't rack up the counting numbers that you would want in a blowout. I could see if the Cowboys really needed someone to step up on defense and Micah Parsons was a no-show. Maybe then that would be time to have that conversation and be like, oh, Micah didn't show up when they most needed him. Is he really all that great? And even then, that would be a BS topic. But to sit here and have this type of topic, to question Micah Parsons on a mental level, forget the statistics, to question him on a mental level based off of this 1 week is just sad and pathetic. That's all I can say. Either way, let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. Do you think that Micah Parsons deserved the criticism he got, or do you think the Undisputed is just reaching for ratings at this point? Because they're floundering. They're floundering, and you can see it on Skip Bayless's face. He sees the writing on the wall. His time is coming very, very near. Either way, y'all always end these videos. How about them Cowboys? Take it away, Pastor.
Calling me, texting me, paging me, asking me, am I still them boys? Y'all usually check on me. Listen. I'm still them boys. Hey! Woo! Hey! I'm still them boys.